The light in apartment 4B. On the first night Mia moved into apartment 4B, the building felt like it was holding its breath. The hallway lights flickered like they couldn't decide whether to stay on. The paint on the walls had the tired look of a place that had seen too many winters. Someone's old doormat had curled at the edges, and the elevator groaned when it rose, as if it needed a pep talk. Mia carried her last box with both hands, balancing it against her chest. Her key scraped the lock twice before it finally turned. When the door opened, the apartment greeted her with silence. It wasn't a sad silence. Not yet. It was just empty. She set the box down in the middle of the living room and stood there, letting her eyes adjust. Her new place was small, but it was hers. No roommates. No family opinions. No voices coming through the walls, asking if she'd eaten or if she'd filled out her job applications. A fresh start. She tried to believe that. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The landlord had probably scrubbed the counters and called it good. The blinds were half bent, and the old radiator under the window had been painted over so many times it looked like it was wearing armor. Mia opened the nearest box and pulled out a mug, the one with a tiny chip near the rim. It had been her dad's favorite. The first time it chipped, he'd shrugged and said, "That's how you know it's yours." She put it on the counter like it was a small flag planted in unfamiliar land. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mom. "Did you get there okay?" Mia stared at the screen until her eyes began to sting. She typed, "Yeah, I'm fine." Then added a heart emoji because it was easier than writing the truth. The truth was that the last 2 months had been a blur of hospital parking garages, paper cups of coffee, and waiting rooms that smelled like antiseptic and patience. The truth was that her dad's voice had grown smaller until it was barely a whisper, and then one morning it wasn't there at all. And the truth was that she had moved to this city because staying in her childhood home felt like living inside an echo. Mia put her phone face down on the counter and pressed both palms against it, like she could physically hold her emotions in place. That was when she heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping from the wall. At first she thought it was the radiator clicking. Old buildings made sounds. They breathed and sighed and complained. But then it came again, tap tap pause tap. Mia turned her head toward the sound. It was coming from the wall she shared with the apartment next door. Someone was knocking, not at her door, at the wall. Mia walked closer, slow and cautious, and pressed her ear to the paint. She listened. Tap tap pause tap. Then, faintly, a voice. Old, thin, like paper rubbing against paper. "Hello!" Mia froze. She backed away from the wall, then stepped forward again as if her body couldn't decide which instinct to follow. She raised her hand and tapped back once. A pause. Then a small laugh, soft, surprised. "Oh," the voice said. "You can hear me." Mia swallowed. Yes. Another pause, like the person on the other side was rearranging their courage. "I'm Arthur," the voice said. "I'm in 4A. I'm sorry if I startled you. I don't mean to bother anyone. It's just the wall is closer than the hallway." Mia stared at the wall, imagining the stranger on the other side. "I'm Mia," she said. "I just moved in." "Welcome," Arthur said. "If you need anything, well, I'm right here." Mia almost laughed at how strange that sounded. Right here, on the other side of a wall, a neighbor she couldn't even see. But there was something gentle in the way he said it, like he had practiced kindness the way other people practiced piano. "Thank you," she said. She waited, but Arthur didn't speak again. Instead, she heard a soft shuffle as if he had stepped away. The silence returned. Mia exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. She looked around her empty living room again, but now it felt slightly different, like the building had opened one eye. Over the next week, Mia fell into routines the way you fall into a new mattress, awkward at first, then gradually with relief. She found the closest grocery store, the cheapest laundromat, the bus route that didn't make her late. She unpacked her clothes and hung a small framed photo of her and her dad on the bookshelf. In the picture, they were wearing ridiculous matching sunglasses and laughing as if the world had never taught them sorrow. Mia started a new job at a small bookstore cafe called Paper and Steam, where the scent of espresso mixed with the smell of worn pages. Her coworkers were kind in that city way, friendly, but not asking too many questions. She liked it. Or at least, she liked having somewhere to go. At night, when she returned to apartment 4B, she would sometimes hear Arthur's tapping again. Tap tap pause tap. Always the same pattern. Mia began to tap back, It became their version of a wave, their version of I'm here. Sometimes Arthur would speak after the taps. "How was your day?" he'd ask. "Long," Mia would answer, leaning against the wall with her arms folded. "I spilled latte foam on my shoes," Arthur would chuckle. A tragedy. Sometimes he'd tell her small things, like he used to teach high school history, or that he liked crossword puzzles, or that he had a cat once named Clementine who only liked him on Tuesdays. Mia found herself smiling, which surprised her. The last time she had smiled without forcing, it felt like a lifetime ago. But the strangest part was how their conversations stayed safe. Arthur didn't ask why she moved. Mia didn't ask why he knocked on walls instead of doors. They simply talked, like two people sitting on the same bench but looking out at different parts of the park. One night, Mia came home later than usual. It had been raining, and her hair was damp, her shoulders tense. She had spent the entire day helping a little boy in the bookstore find a book for his mom. The boy had clutched a crumpled list, and the first line had read, "Things that make her feel better when she's sad." Mia had gone to the back room afterward and cried quietly behind a stack of shipment boxes, because grief has a way of finding you when you least expect it, like water seeping through a crack. Now she stood in her kitchen, staring at a can of soup, too tired to open it. Tapped. Pause tap. Mia walked to the wall like it was a magnet pulling her. She tapped back once. Arthur's voice came through, gentle and concerned. "You're late." "Yeah," Mia said, her voice rough. "Hard day?" Mia hesitated. Her throat tightened. She almost said, "I'm fine," out of habit. But something about Arthur's question made her feel like maybe she didn't have to perform. "My dad died," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the bluntness. 2 months ago." There was a long pause, not an uncomfortable one, a respectful one. "I'm sorry," Arthur said softly. "I'm so sorry, Mia." Mia closed her eyes. She pressed her forehead to the wall. The paint was cool. "I moved here because I thought if I was somewhere else it wouldn't hurt as much," she whispered. "But it's like I brought the hurt with me." Arthur didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had that paper-thin quality again, but it was steady. "Grief isn't a suitcase you can leave behind," he said. "It's more like a shadow. It goes where you go, but shadows change shape depending on the light." Mia let out a shaky breath. Arthur continued, "When my wife died, I tried to run too. Different city, different apartment, new furniture. I thought if I replaced enough things, the ache would get confused and stop following me." Mia's eyes snapped open. "Your wife?" Arthur hummed quietly, a sound that held years. "Yes, Eleanor. She was the kind of person who made strangers tell her their secrets in grocery lines." Mia smiled despite herself. "That sounds nice." "It was," Arthur said, and then it was gone. The wall between them felt thinner than usual. "What helped you?" Mia asked. Arthur sighed. "At first, nothing, and then small things. I learned to make tea the way she liked it. I listened to the songs we used to dance to even though it hurt. I let myself feel the ache instead of treating it like an enemy." Mia swallowed hard. "I don't know how to do that." Arthur's voice softened. "You're already doing it. You told someone, that's a step." Mia rested her hand on the wall, fingers spread. "I don't want to be sad forever." "You won't," Arthur said. "But you will carry him. That's not the same thing." Mia's eyes stung again, but this time the tears felt cleaner. Like rain. "Thank you," she whispered. Arthur's voice warmed. "Anytime, I'm right here." As the weeks passed, Mia and Arthur's wall conversations grew longer. Sometimes Mia would come home and hear Arthur playing old records. The music would slip through the wall like a memory. Jazz, soft piano, a voice from another era. Sometimes Arthur would ask Mia about the bookstore, and she'd tell him about the customers who argued over the best mystery novel or the teenager who came in every Friday to read poetry like it was medicine. Arthur listened the way people used to listen fully. One night, Mia brought home a small potted plant. She set it near her window, hoping it would survive the dim sunlight. "What's that?" Arthur asked when he heard her moving things around. "A plant," Mia said. "A bold choice," Arthur teased. "Those are notoriously demanding roommates." Mia laughed. "I read online that plants help with anxiety." Arthur's tone shifted, curious. "Do you have anxiety?" Mia paused, staring at the plant's small green leaves. "I think I have grief pretending to be anxiety." Arthur let out a quiet ah. Mia added, "My dad used to have a garden, tomatoes mostly. He talked to them like they were friends." Arthur chuckled. "Maybe you should talk to yours." Mia rolled her eyes. "What would I even say?" Arthur thought for a moment. "Tell it you're trying." Mia stared at the plant again. Then, feeling ridiculous, she leaned in and whispered, "I'm trying." Arthur laughed on the other side of the wall, and the sound made Mia's chest feel lighter. One Saturday morning, Mia woke to the sound of rain tapping the window. She made coffee, then remembered she was out of sugar. She debated going to the store. The rain looked cold and relentless. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Mia smiled and crossed the living room, coffee mug in hand. She tapped back. Arthur's voice came through with a hint of excitement. "Mia!" "What?" she asked, amused. "I have a question." "Okay. How do you feel about pancakes?" Mia blinked. "Pancakes?" Arthur cleared his throat. "I might have made too much batter, habit. Alina loved pancakes on rainy mornings. I haven't made them in a long time, but today I thought, why not?" Mia's heart softened. "That's sweet." Arthur hesitated. This is silly, would you like some? I could leave them outside your door." "I know we've never," he stopped, as if he had realized how odd it sounded. Mia stared at her coffee like it might give her instructions. She had never met Arthur face to face. Not once. They were voices and taps and music. But the thought of warm pancakes on a rainy morning made by someone who remembered how to care felt like a small miracle. "Yeah," she said softly, "I'd like that." There was a pause, then Arthur exhaled in relief. "Okay, give me 5 minutes." Mia walked to her door and opened it, peering into the hallway. The building was quiet, the air smelling faintly of damp concrete. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps. Slow, careful, then the faintest rustle of paper. Mia peeked through the peephole. An elderly man stood in the hallway, slightly hunched, holding a plate covered with foil. His hair was thin and silver, his sweater too large. His hands shook a little as he set the plate down in front of her door. Then he looked toward his own door as if he could sense her watching. He didn't look sad. Not exactly. He looked tender, like someone who still believed in offering good things. Mia's throat tightened. Arthur straightened slowly, then turned back toward his door. Before he went in, he lifted his hand and tapped twice on the wall between their apartments. Tap, tap. Mia pressed her hand against her side of the wall, smiling with tears in her eyes. When she opened her door and picked up the plate, it was warm. On top of the foil, Arthur had placed a small napkin with handwriting on it. "Rain makes everything honest. Eat. A." Mia carried the plate to her kitchen table like it was fragile treasure. She peeled back the foil. 3 pancakes, slightly uneven. The kind that weren't made for Instagram. The kind that were made for someone who mattered. Mia took a bite. They tasted like vanilla and memory. And for the first time since her dad died, she felt something close to peace. That afternoon, Mia decided to do something she had been avoiding. She took the framed photo of her and her dad down from the shelf and set it on the table. She stared at it for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and started a document titled Dad. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She didn't know what she was doing. She just knew she needed to get the words out of her head and into the world. She began to type, slowly at first. "You used to wake me up on Saturdays by making terrible jokes. You always pretended the coffee machine was a spaceship. You cried at the end of movies but denied it. You told me I was brave even when I wasn't." Mia wrote until her shoulders loosened, until the tight knot inside her chest began to unwind like a rope being set down. When she finally stopped, the document was long, messy, and full of typos. It was also real. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Mia wiped her face quickly and went to the wall. She tapped back. Arthur's voice came through. "You okay?" Mia laughed softly. "No, but yes, kind of," Arthur hummed. "That sounds like healing." Mia looked at her laptop. "I wrote about him." Arthur's tone warmed. "Good." Mia swallowed. "Do you ever write about Alina?" Arthur was quiet for a moment. Then, "Not as much as I should." Mia leaned her head against the wall. "Maybe you could." Arthur's voice softened into something almost shy. "Maybe I will." Winter arrived like a slow sigh. The city's trees lost their leaves. The sky stayed gray longer. The air turned sharp. Mia's plant by the window struggled, but it stayed alive. So did Mia. She started to laugh more at work. She began to recognize regular customers. She found a favorite corner in the bookstore where sunlight fell on the floor in the afternoons, and she would stand there when she needed to feel warm. At night, she and Arthur talked about everything and nothing. They debated the best holiday songs. Arthur claimed that anything after 1975 didn't count. Mia told him he was ridiculous, and he said that was his right as an old man. Sometimes, though, Arthur would go quiet for days. Mia would tap and get no response. At first, she told herself he was busy. He was older. people rested more. But after the third day of silence, Mia's unease grew into a sharp worry. She stood in her living room, staring at the wall like it might explain. Tap, tap, pause, tap. No answer. Mia tried again. Nothing. Her heart began to pound. She grabbed her jacket, stepped into the hallway, and walked to apartment 4A. She stood in front of Arthur's door. It looked exactly like hers, except the doormat was newer and there was a small wreath hung even though it wasn't Christmas yet. Mia raised her hand and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. Arthur. Still nothing. Mia's stomach dropped. She pressed her ear to the door, listening for movement. Silence. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then called the building manager. 15 minutes later, the manager arrived with a key, grumbling about tenants panicking for no reason. But when the door swung open, the manager's face changed. Arthur was on the living room floor, not collapsed dramatically, not surrounded by chaos. He was lying on his side near the couch, one hand still clutching a folded blanket as if he had been trying to get comfortable. His eyes were closed. Mia rushed forward, heart in her throat. Arthur! The manager called 911. Mia knelt beside Arthur, her hands shaking. She didn't know what to do. She just kept saying his name like it was a rope she could throw him. And then Arthur's eyes fluttered. He inhaled. A weak, raspy sound. He was alive. The paramedics arrived quickly. They moved with calm efficiency, checking his pulse, lifting him carefully onto a stretcher. Arthur's eyes found Mia's. His lips moved slightly. Mia leaned in close. What? Arthur whispered, barely audible. I tried to tap. Mia's eyes filled with tears. It's okay, you don't have to. Arthur's gaze softened. You came. Mia squeezed his hand gently. Of course I did. Arthur blinked slowly, and his eyes closed again as the paramedics carried him out. Mia followed them into the hallway, standing there as the elevator doors closed on Arthur's pale face. The building felt like it was holding its breath again. Only this time, Mia was holding hers too.